You know that kind of silence that sounds louder than an explosion? No, I'm serious. I'm not a writer, and I'm not a philosopher. I'm a retired structural engineer. I thought I'd spend my pension fishing on Lake Michigan, but instead, I moved to Oregon and bought an old house. The place was cheap because the previous owner, a Mr. Donovan, had died right there in the living room. Heart attack. They only found him 3 weeks later when the neighbors complained about the smell. The realtor, a bubbly blonde, chirped at me. The body stain is still there, of course, but the hardwood floors don't even need sanding. I smirked at that. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in aging electrical wiring and poor ventilation. I aired out the smell. I replaced the hardwood. All that was left was to deal with the basement. And that, folks, is where my engineer's logic cracked. Because in that house, there was one door I just couldn't reach. I'm a perfectionist. When I got the house documents, I compared them to reality. Everything matched, except for one detail. On the basement plan, along the north wall, there was supposed to be a utility room. Small, maybe 3 by 4 feet. But in reality, there was just a solid concrete wall painted a cheerful yellow. I measured the distance from the stairs. According to the blueprint, the door should have been exactly where an old metal workbench sat, bolted to the floor. At first, I thought it was just a mistake in the paperwork. No big deal. But then I looked at the foundation. I walked around the outside of the house with a tape measure, corner to corner, 44 feet. I go inside, measure the exact same stretch in the basement, and I get 40 feet, 9 inches. 4 feet had simply vanished. It's impossible unless someone teleported part of the foundation into another dimension. The space was eaten by the wall, a false wall. I shoved the workbench aside. It was damn heavy, steel and oak, and I broke a sweat doing it. But once I moved it a couple of feet, I saw something that hadn't been obvious before because of an old coffee can full of nails and cobwebs. A doorknob. It was built right into the wall, disguised as the texture of the concrete, and it was warm. I touched it with my knuckles, and a chill shot through me, even though the metal was probably about 100 degrees. I tried to turn it, locked solid, but any engineer knows there's no lock you can't open. I drilled a small hole and snaked in an endoscope, one of those little flexible cameras plumbers use. The image quality was garbage, but it was enough. On my phone screen, I saw a room, but it wasn't a utility closet. It wasn't storage. The walls were covered in old, yellowed felt padding, soundproofing, full coverage. In the middle of the room, there was a chair. Just a normal wooden chair, but it had leather straps attached to the armrests and legs. And on the wall, directly facing the chair at eye level, hung a painting. A little pastoral landscape. Green meadow, white clouds, an idol. Honestly, I expected to see a pile of bones or a safe full of cash. Instead, I saw a chair and a painting. A strange feeling settled in my gut. Nothing dangerous in theory. But the hairs on my arms stood up because the painting was illuminated. In a bricked-up room with no visible light switch, a light was on. Dim, yellow, like a nightlight. An old sledgehammer and a chisel were all it took to smash the lock. Old school. The door swung open with a horrible groan, and I was hit by a smell. Not death, no. The smell of ozone, like right after a thunderstorm, mixed with the stench of old, sour human sweat. I stepped inside, and the door gently swung shut behind me, though I thought I had propped it open with a brick. At least I thought I had. I stood there in that box of soundproofing, staring at the painting. It was strange. I swear when I looked at it through the camera, the clouds had been in a different position. Now they were clustered over a hill. Oil on canvas, old, but in good condition. I reached out and touched it. It was damp, not dusty, wet to the touch. And that's when I found the instructions. Carved into the backrest of the chair, under a layer of grime and dust, was a message. Jagged, jumping letters, scratched in, with fingernails by the looks of it. It read, "Sit, look at the meadow for 10 minutes. Do not blink. Then close your eyes." I should have left. I knew I should have left. This was a clinical portrait of psychosis. But, old men get bored sometimes. Adrenaline is a rare commodity. I checked my watch the moment I sat down. I tightened the straps on my left wrist and ankles, not tightly, just mimicking the posture, and I started to look. It was the most generic green field you can imagine. Grass, a few daisies, pastoral bliss. But after a minute, I noticed the painting no longer looked like oil. It looked sharp, too sharp, like an HD TV. I could see the blades of grass swaying in the breeze, but there was no breeze in this room. The AC wasn't running. The soundproofing was so dense I could hear the blood rushing through my own head. 5 minutes in, my eyes started to burn. I wanted to blink. Tears were streaming down my face, but I kept looking. I stupidly followed the madman's instructions, and I saw a figure. On the horizon, far, far away, a person appeared. He didn't walk. He just materialized, 1 inch closer than he had been a second before. He was getting closer, but not like in a movie where there's animation. It was like a glitching freeze frame. 1 second he was far away. The next, he was at the base of the hill. The next, he had already crossed half the meadow. I physically could not blink. It felt like someone was holding my eyelids open with their fingers. I tried to raise my hand, but the strap I had tied so loosely had somehow tightened into a damn sailor's knot, digging into my wrist until it drew blood. I was staring into the eyes of this being. It was tall. A man? No. It had my grandfather's face, a kind, tired face full of wrinkles, but its mouth wasn't moving, yet I heard words. They didn't come through my ears. They resonated right in my skull, like a migraine. The voice said, "Good job not blinking. 2 minutes left. Then it will be too late. Look at my hand." The being raised its hand. And do you know what it was holding? A key. An old, rusty key, identical to the one for the door I had just busted open. It held it out in front of itself on an open palm. "You will enter the house," the voice said. "Don't do it. Just slam the door from the other side. Bury it. If I reach the edge of the frame before the time runs out, I'll stay with you forever." I'm not crazy. I'm an engineer. I tried to explain it to myself as hypoxia or mold poisoning, but I could smell the ozone turning into the smell of burnt meat. The being was now 10 feet from the edge of the canvas. I could see its feet. They were walking, but the grass beneath them didn't bend. It was just a hologram bleeding through the paint on a completely black background. The 10 minutes ran out. I don't know how I knew without a clock, but the humming stopped. A ringing silence took its place. The instructions said, "Then close your eyes." I obeyed. I squeezed my eyelids shut so hard I saw fireworks under my skull. And as I sat there, eyes closed, I heard footsteps. Not inside the painting anymore. Inside the room, right next to my face. Bare, wet feet slapping on the concrete floor. They circled behind my chair. I felt breath on the back of my neck. Cold breath, smelling of damp soil. I heard the creaking of its joints, as if it were bending down right over me. I wanted to scream, but my throat seized up. I thought I was going to die of a heart attack, just like poor Donovan before me. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. And then I heard a clink. The key dropped onto the concrete. A sharp, metallic sound right at my feet. Silence. I opened my eyes. The room was empty and stuffy. The light was off. Only my phone's flashlight cut through the absolute darkness. I freed my hand. I don't know how. But the skin was torn to the meat, and the strap just slipped off. I looked at the painting. The meadow was empty. The grass was green and still, just a cheap piece of art. And there, at the base of the wall in the dust, lay a rusty key. Not old, not fake, a completely material, cold piece of iron. I picked it up, and that's when I made my mistake, the big one. I raised my head and looked at the spot my eyes had been fixed on while I was strapped to that chair. Above the door I had walked through, there was another message. I hadn't seen it when I came in because it had been covered by the soundproofing felt, which had now peeled off. It read, "Don't turn around." I didn't turn around. I stared at that message, and my spine was turning to ice because I could feel something standing right behind me, an inch from the back of my skull, something that shouldn't be there. Tears, or maybe blood from burst vessels, I don't know, were running down my cheeks. I don't know how I got out of that room. I think I shuffled backwards, or maybe I crawled. All I remember is slamming that damn door shut and piling the workbench against it. I welded the door shut at 2 in the morning. The neighbors probably thought I had lost my mind. A week later, I sold the house for a quarter of what I paid to some hipster from Portland. I didn't tell him about the basement. And you know what? I don't care. I'm not a hero. I'm a survivor. But the problem isn't the house. The problem is me. Because when I was driving away, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there, on the edge of the back seat, was an old rusted key. The same one that had fallen at my feet. I swear to you, I threw it in the river, but it came back. I'm sitting in a motel right now, 3 states away. The key is on the nightstand, and every night at exactly 3:33 a.m. when I wake up, I see that the painting above the bed, a cheap hotel reproduction of a waterfall, is turning into a green meadow. And each time, the figure on the horizon is closer, and I know that one night I'm going to wake up and the painting will be empty, because it will be standing right next to my bed, and I won't be able to stop myself from turning around. Just a static shot, silence, the sound of a key dropping onto a wooden table. No music, just darkness and the weight of what's coming.